logistics of this film was very ambitious for the budget. I've been involved in 4 other movies, and there isn't, I don't think, a single gun in them. This film is wall-to-wall guns.
Action!
The film as a whole, I would sum up and say it was an adventure. We were very conscious from an early stage that the film demanded an enormous amount and an array of weapons. From the Kalashnikovs to the tanks to the arms fair. And many minibus scouting journeys, conversations were spent discussing how we were going to appropriate the vast array of weapons that we needed.
In fact, it was almost just akin to being an arms dealer, because I had to arrange so many weapons each day. The strange thing, I almost had to get into the head of an arms dealer. I came across a number of guys in the making of the film, a number of arms dealers, and I actually liked them, which was the disturbing part of it, I think.
When I first read the script, I wasn't sure I really wanted to be this character, because I was afraid of getting in my head too much and the things that he's really doing. I certainly haven't ever read a screenplay like Lord of War before. A lot of times you see pictures that deal with the sort of the drug business, but very rarely do you get to have what appears to be an inside look at the gun business. It seems like there's something very honest about this and very truthful about it.
There's a scene in the movie where there are 50 Soviet T-72 tanks, and they were owned by one private arms dealer in the Czech Republic. And he said, there's just one catch. You know, you can have them for your movie, but I need them back by December because I'm selling them to Libya. Life kept imitating art because, you know, you're in Africa and you want a plane to replicate an arms dealer's plane. And where do you get one? Well, you actually rent it from an arms dealer. And so the plane in the film was running real guns into the Congo a week before we were filming it with fake guns. And the Russian crew would say, it looks authentic. When I needed 3,000 Kalashnikovs for this armory that Nicolas Cage's character walked through with his uncle, it was cheaper to get real guns than fake guns. So we bought 3,000 real Kalashnikovs and then sold them back. So it was sort of an elaborate rental, but you know, we sold them back for a discount. So I wouldn't make much of an arms dealer. But the fact that I could get 3,000 Kalashnikovs so easily was sobering. There are still, I think, 1 million Kalashnikovs in Ukraine that will still end up in one war zone or another. It is a sort of a great unexplored consequence of the end of the Cold War, that there were suddenly warehouses full of weapons and no one watching them, and most of them ended up in Africa. South Africa was the main location for the film, but it had to stand in for 13 different countries. South Africa had to be West Africa and North Africa and Beirut and the Caribbean, South America, many other countries. The Czech Republic stood in for Ukraine, and New York played New York.
What's your name, sir?
I'm Prosper.
Prosper? Yes. Good name. So let me see you raise your...
I was very keen from an early stage to make each country look different, the people to look different. So we sent sort of people scouts out, if you like, to go and look for extras at a very early stage. And one of my assistants built up an enormous database in Africa, Namibia, and predominantly South Africa, to feature in the film and its African locations.
This is what's great about here, is that you definitely find all the diversity that was required for the film. Otherwise, we would not have been able to do the film.
South Africa is everything that we know about South Africa. You know, they're 10 years on or 12 years on from a major change in their society. They know who they are and they know how the world views them. And they've just opened up to the rest of the world and said, bring your films in, make your films, and we will accommodate you. What I got from South Africa was a lot of hope, you know, especially from the younger generation, the generation that didn't grow up with that
I remember going with Andrew on one of our first recce's. Andrew said to me afterwards, what an amazing feeling of joy came out of this township. I knew exactly what he meant. There was no sorrow, even though, you know, there's an enormous problem with AIDS and deprivation, but the feeling of happiness that came, and we were greeted everywhere with smiles and children.
What an incredible experience to spend part of your life down in South Africa. I went on safari a couple of times and had a really incredible time during the making of this film. It was easier for me because I didn't have the workload that Nick had in this film, so I was able to take advantage of being in South Africa and really getting to know it a little bit.
When I read the script and it described an Antonov, which for the non-plane enthusiasts amongst us is a plane about the size of a jumbo jet, only with 4 propellers, which makes it more lethal. It's a script read that we had to land it on 1,000 people on a road, on a dirt track, and they scatter and it comes to a halt millimetres from a little baby sitting on the track. My first port of call was the Civil Aviation Authority in South Africa, just to find out whether we could even do this. I suspected we probably wouldn't be able to do it with real people, and indeed we were right, and the producers suspected the same, and we had to shoot most of the sequence using plates. However, we still had to fly a plane over people, or to look like it was flying over people, and we still had to fly a plane onto a dirt road, which in itself is a sort of health and safety nightmare. The course of action we took in the end was we got hold of an air base right bang in the middle of South Africa, called Robertson, wine country, and we covered it with dirt. So it was a metal road underneath, but then dirt on top.
Okay, everybody. We are now going to bring the plane into land. We will roll all cameras when it comes into land.
Then we came to film the actual stunt, of which only one element meant that we physically had human beings on the road and the plane on the road as well. Although the plane was half a mile up the road and the human beings were half a mile down the road, we, through the joy of long lenses on the cameras, Amir brilliantly made it look like they were right next to each other.
Drop the toy and go down to the park.
All our extras, sort of 500 of them, they all spoke a range of probably 12 different languages. So it's not just a case of getting one translator in, although we had an amazing guy called Sandile he knew about 6 of the languages, so he covered most of it.
Quite fantastic.
It's very good. You get the camera a little closer.
No, I didn't get the camera closer. Look where he went. He's in the grass.
No, I'm kidding.
Can we see that one?
Well, it's always hard when you're shooting out in the middle of nowhere, and you know you've got X amount of time before the sun goes down, and 200 extras in a giant 1960s Russian plane supposed to land in the middle of a shot, and 4-page dialogue scene while that's going on. For some reason that can rattle the nervous system. I'll probably take that to my grave, remembering that. It's fun.
There was a South African capon vulture, I think it was called, on the set that day. And I had no doubt that this thing was a very ferocious Velociraptor from like Jurassic Park. I mean, the thing was a dinosaur. And it was yelling, it was like squawking and jump hopping, and it had these talons that if it landed on any part of you, you'd be in pieces. So I was sort of taken by that. And they were feeding it baby vultures, which made the whole scene more horrifying.
We found this guy who we'd auditioned and found he could lie very, very still for a long time, because the vulture trainer had told us that the only way the vulture would go onto him is if he actually thought that this guy was dead. But on the last take, this vulture just went ka-dunk straight. I think it was his hand or something. Anyway, this poor guy, who'd been brilliant, I mean just brilliant, and lain there so still, got the shock of his life as this bird just pecked away at his hand. And it didn't hurt him, he was absolutely fine, and he laughed along with us. And it just, the sort of release at that moment of, I mean, there are moments in filmmaking when you just think, what are we trying to do?
And then I'm working with Sammy, who plays Andre Baptiste Jr. He's firing his gold-plated Kalashnikov out of the car, going, yeah! And there's two Liberian girls dressed as cheerleaders from the football team back in the States. The whole thing was very bizarre.
We're going to give you some rifles. These rifles are real rifles, they're not fakes. Please, when you've got these rifles, look after them. Don't put them down in the sand and get grit in them. Some of you may have to fire these rifles, okay? So we don't want to get sand in so they don't work, and we don't want sand flying across the set. So look after them as if they were your personal property.
We shot very close to Namibia in 120-degree heat.
And we were filming 4 different countries in the desert. But it was hot, and of course we were at the end of the shoot. So we were tired, and we were doing big explosions.
On the truck here, we're weakening it in such a fashion that it looks like a whole bunch of ammunition was set off by a hand grenade. And again, we're not going to the Hollywood fireball, so the Tyrant and his crew have worked on this truck, weakening it in specific areas, putting in cannons into the frame to crack and break the frame and fragment the frame, cannons to throw things high up in the air, plus we're also feeding the explosion with large volumes of oxygen, to give it a quicker flash. Basically, this way it's safe. We're going to have a man in very close proximity. The area of projection of debris is designed in such a way that it will not project left or right of a specific cone in which our stunt double is going to be running. And hopefully, other than needing a change of underwear and taking out some earplugs, he should be all right.
Stand by, we are rolling, and action!
It was tough, and we were working fairly substantial hours at that point.
Normally you shoot a 5-day week or a 6-day week, and we shot a 7-day week.
In the desert, it's fairly arduous for 120 cast and crew. It pushed us to the limit. That night, I've never seen 120 people get out of a location so fast.
I had a United Nations crew. Guess my right and left hand are Amir and Jean-Vincent.
The director interested in graphic, in architecture, in space, in frame, so it's much better for me because I have a good partner and I can propose a lot of ideas and he can choose and he can push me and he has a very precise look.
He had to come up with a stylized approach. We had to be quite resourceful, to make South Africa look like West Africa. We had to use sort of cheap tricks, really. We didn't have a huge budget, so we would just lay out 10,000 bricks, because bricks are cheap, and dress a woman in garb from North Africa. It was also a good juxtaposition because Yuri would walk past in his business suit and he'd be selling the most high-tech weaponry. And yet in the foreground you have all of these sort of ancient bricks drying there, and it just gave a good contrast to the worlds.
This kind of job is good for me and exciting, and at the same time very very tough because every set has to be perfect. And normally I can find 10 or 15 sets less important, so my crew can relax a little bit. But for this one, it's impossible.
Jean-Vincent is an element all to himself. He is extremely talented. He trained as an architect. He always gives a refreshing angle on something. He could actually build the house physically properly if he had to. So his sets are extraordinary.
The pattern of this movie all the time is like a casing, a bullet, a circle. A lot of design are based on the cylinder or the circle, and we turn, we circle around. So it's very graphic but very beautiful.
That's good, actually.
Amir's brilliant at moving the camera. Because Yuri Orlov, the character Nicolas Cage plays, is such a nomad, international arms dealer, I felt that as he was traveling, the camera should also be traveling. And Amir did that brilliantly.
Amir is so determined in what he wants to do and brilliant at what he does that it does almost make it effortless. He just knows exactly where he wants his camera. Him and Jean Vincent had tapped into how Andrew wanted the film to look more than anyone else.
Is that good? Like that?
I don't like that angle on him. I think.
Well, you can change the angle.
I think maybe we're here. Where do you want this?
Well, it's going to be like this. Okay. With the legs going down.
The set that Andrew kind of builds up has got so much trust on it and so much freedom on it. You can try anything. You can do anything, and then, you know, if it doesn't work, we'll cut it. But if you have the courage to go for something that's unusual or a little strange, go for it. And why not? That's what I liked about working with that man.
I like actually the strange contrast with religion.
His eye for detail is quite exceptional. For example, every prop that was used in the film was hand-picked by him, down to every little hand prop, up to every tank, was literally picked by him.
I want these guys over here.
He has a very precise look. He loves symmetry. He likes to be very, very clean, very polished. Everything is perfect. The frame, his design has to be very elegant and very precise.
His movies have a real opinion and a real approach that's unique to him. I think that's one of the reasons why I really like working with him. It's very rare that you find somebody that really has their own voice, and Andrew really has that.
I don't think it's a political film because it's the truth. I mean, if the truth is political, then it's political.
At the end of the movie, you just don't want to have anything to do with this world. You're even wondering why it has to exist today. Unfortunately, this is the reality.
I'm glad that this film has been done by Andrew, because then now we can talk about it, and now we can even start to make decisions about that type of stuff that our governments do without us thinking. You know, theatre, in my opinion, as an actor, is one of those things that a storyteller does, is you help society move itself forward, or at least, which this film does, question itself.
It's not like any other movie you've seen, that I know. That's what I feel very confident about, having finished the movie, is that I know it will be unique.
And the way that Traffic kind of showed us the underbelly of the drug trade, this film gets into that same arena, but with guns.
He always obviously has a larger point he's trying to make with his movies, whether he's writing and directing. But this one, more so than Gattaca or The Truman Show, his point is very much grounded in today's world and exactly how the world operates.
It's not like a typical Andrew Nicoll script that ventures or borders on science fiction. It's more grounded, more linear story structure with Andrew's unique lens on it, if you will. I think it should be a good counterpoint.
Some people say, well, you know, this is a left-wing film. The truth is, the US, for instance, is by far and away the biggest arms supplier in the world. But that's the same if Bush is president or Clinton is president. So it doesn't really have any party affiliation, this business. It's just business.